So we jumped directly into the video recording with the Zenfone 9 on the GCam mod, and I want to do a comparison against the Xperia 5 Mark IV here, but I'm using the GCam mod on the Zenfone 9 because it's so much better than the native camera app on the Zenfone 9. So this is the front-facing video here. I think it's only 1080p. I didn't even see anything there to configure, so I think it is 1080p. There's autofocus. I can zoom in a little bit, 1.4 times crop or 1 times. And yeah, it looks stable on the screen. Hopefully it is stable. Let's compare it with the 5 Mark IV. And this is now the Xperia 5 Mark IV's front-facing camera, 4K 30 frames per second. I think HDR looks fine here on the screen at least. And this is stabilization and the audio quality using an external microphone just like on the Zenfone 9. So what do you think about the Xperia 5 Mark IV's front-facing video? And here's now the Zenfone 9, and one of the strongest points of the Zenfone 9, the gimbal stabilization. Even using the GCam you can have gimbal stabilized. The lens here, the main lens here right now, and it also doesn't suffer from this autofocus issue that I had with the native Asus Zenfone app. So it's focusing nicely on my face right now. The only problem that I have here with the GCam mod is that you cannot switch to the ultra wide angle. It shows you the possibility to do so, but as soon as I do it, it stops recording. So I have to stop recording here right now. I switched to the ultra wide angle, and now we have the ultra wide angle here on the GCam mod. I think it also has some focus improvements, so it's focusing more on me than instead of the background, and also stabilization should be fine here as well on the Zenfone 9. What do you think about the GCam mod here on the Zenfone 9? And let's compare it with the Xperia. And now we have the Xperia 5 Mark IV here with its nice stabilized lens as well. The main camera lens even doesn't have gimbal stabilization. It is stable enough, and I have the possibility to just go and to the 16mm one during recording thanks to seamless zoom. And if I want to, I can even go and zoom in on something just like this one here. There's a ship passing by, and I can go directly to 60mm here, and if I want to, I can even zoom further, as you can see here, up to 7.5 times 180mm, which still looks fine. And yeah, the Zenfone 9 comes nowhere close to this one here. So I think the race here is pretty much between the main lenses here and the ultra wide angles, because yeah, the Xperia is the clear winner when it comes to the zoom lens. What do you think? Let's do a video comparison of the front-facing camera, and we'll go step by step. On the left always the Zenfone 9, on the right always the Xperia 5 Mark IV. Front-facing camera, we have a big difference. The Zenfone 9 only records 1080p. When using GCam, I don't have an option to go to 4K. The Xperia 5 Mark IV has the option to go to 4K. What we can see here, over-dramatizing the clouds on the Zenfone 9, but it could be also because the sun is out. My face is more yellow here, as you can see here. And when I compare it, especially here with the clouds in the background, you can see both are doing overexposure. My face is still visible on the Xperia 5 Mark IV, but a little bit underexposed, as well as the background here, where the Zenfone 9 decides to overexpose the foreground, the background, especially the clouds. We have a bit of better exposure here, and my face is nicely exposed as well. And yeah, but overall my face is a bit more yellowish, where it is a little bit less yellowish on the 5 Mark IV. But they're very, very close in terms of stabilization and bokeh, because they use almost the same sensor size here, and also the same kind of distance. The autofocus on the Zenfone 9 is not really helping anything or making anything a big change or anything better than the Xperia 5 Mark IV's fixed focus cam. Let's compare the main cameras and the videos. The stabilization on the Zenfone 9 is very good, but I don't see anything particular better than on the Xperia 5 Mark IV. Maybe a little bit better in terms of stabilization. Otherwise, we have an overexposure of the clouds in the background, but the Zenfone 9, what it does is a little bit of pulsing. So you notice that when I play it back, that especially in the background, there's a bit of pulsing going on, especially in the clouds. You can see it like it's changing exposure in the background very quickly, and you can see it very, very drastically here in this, where it's like blinking almost here in the background. And I don't have this on the Xperia 5 Mark IV, where yeah, it's changing exposure a little bit, but this blinking kind of thing I really don't have there. In general, both very good. I don't see much of an advantage of the big, larger sensor size on the Zenfone 9. I think the Xperia with its bokeh and its stabilization and sharpness is on par with the Zenfone 9 here. The ultra-wide angle is pretty interesting because it has more dynamic range than the main cam on the Zenfone 9, and it has more dynamic range than the Xperia 5 Mark IV, as you can clearly see the overexposure here in the background where everything is nicely exposed. What we can also clearly see is, especially in this photo, in this part of the video, is that the Xperia 5 Mark IV is a bit sharper. I can zoom in shortly for you to check out the sharpness here, and then compare it with the Zenfone 9. So the Zenfone 9 has a bit of more smoother, but it looks a little bit more cinematic here, I have to say. Though I don't like this more kind of reddish kind of face where it's a bit of overblown here on the Xperia, but yeah, I'm not sure. Which one do you prefer? The more HDR on the Zenfone 9 or the better colors on my face and more sharpness on the Xperia 5 Mark IV? So here we have the photos. On the left always the Zenfone 9 with the GCam, on the right always the Xperia 5 Mark IV with the Photo Pro app. What we can clearly see here is the same as what we saw before. Warmer colors on the Xperia 5 Mark IV. You can see it here in the cloud. It's much warmer and much cooler down on the Zenfone 9. We have a little bit more HDR, aggressive HDR and sharpening on the Zenfone 9, but also the lens is a little bit sharper. As you can see here, the Xperia 5 Mark IV has a little bit less sharpness, and also the HDR is a bit better. As you can clearly see, there is a little bit of more details on the Zenfone 9. It is very close together here with those both, but there is a little bit more details on the Zenfone 9 for sure. When we take a look at the ultra-wide angle, we can clearly see again the difference in terms of white balance, more yellow kind of colors, more warmer kind of colors on the Xperia 5 Mark IV. You can see a little bit more of white here, where here it is like having a better HDR, definitely on the Zenfone 9. But what we can clearly see is also how much difference we have in type of clarity. The Xperia 5 Mark IV much more clear here in terms of focus point and also in terms of clarity, what you can see here in the building, for example, in the background. And the same goes for all the other elements here that are much sharper and clearer, especially towards the edge, where I don't know why, but it looks like the Xperia 5 Mark IV has a bit of a wider field of view. I think it is the Zenfone 9's stabilization that's kicking in here. And here you have two pillars in the shot. Here you have only one pillar in the shot, and you can clearly see there's much more detail on the 5 Mark IV in terms of this pillar. So towards the edges, the 5 Mark IV definitely has the better and wider and better ultra-wide angle. When it comes to close-up shots, very close both, with a warmer kind of colors on the 5 Mark IV, cooler kind of colors on the Zenfone 9. The Zenfone 9 has more contrast here, where the Xperia 5 Mark IV doesn't have so much contrast. And if you go to the top, you can clearly see that there is some kind of HDR going on, as we get like a double picture. We don't have this so much here on the Zenfone 9. When we take another shot here at the 5x zoom lens, definitely the Xperia 5 Mark IV takes the lead here. 5x zoom shots both have to crop in a little bit, but the Xperia 5 Mark IV has the 2.5x zoom, so double this one and you get this kind of photo. A little bit livelier colors as well, good HDR on both, but especially the details here. Look at this here and compare it to the Zenfone 9, night and day difference. The Xperia 5 Mark IV just simply wins in terms of zoom shots and everyday usage. In a little bit lower light usage now indoors here, what we can clearly see is again a little bit of a color difference. We have a bit of warmer kind of colors on the Zenfone 9, a bit of cooler on the Xperia 5 Mark IV. What you can also clearly see here is a bit of more noise already creeping in on the Zenfone 9, which is pretty interesting because the Zenfone 9 has a larger sensor and should not have so much noise creeping in. But overall, I think that here the contrast is also a bit stronger on the Zenfone 9. But when you go towards the edges, you can see that it is getting a bit unsharp, and the Xperia 5 Mark IV takes the crown here. And you can clearly see again a little bit more bluish kind of color or tone on the 5 Mark IV in comparison to the Zenfone 9. When we take another shot in dark light situation, we have the night sight mode from Google Cam on the Zenfone 9, and we have a manual exposure mode on the 5 Mark IV, where I dialed up everything manually. You can clearly see that The white balance is good on both. It's a bit darker on this 5 Mark IV, and of course the detail levels, because I dialed it in manually and it's no stitching together of things, is also not perfect here. You can clearly see a lot of noise going on. Both managed to get like a sharp shot, but the Zenfone 9 looks a bit sharper overall, and I think takes the crown here in this shot. The next night side shot is pretty interesting, because the manual dial in on the Xperia 5 Mark IV reveals much more options here, and the interesting thing here is I was expecting the Zenfone 9 to be sharper overall, but yeah, it is a bit sharper, but it's not a night and day difference here. Especially there's more noise creeping in on the Zenfone 9 in its night side mode, where on the 5 Mark IV I could keep 8 shutters, the ISO 800 with a shutter speed of I think it was 0.5 seconds again, and I could get, yeah, very nice exposure here. It's not the sharpest, but if you compare it with the Zenfone 9, you get more detail here, and yeah, more noise on the Zenfone 9. And yeah, this is a pretty interesting result, I would say, for the night photography. Close-up shots, of course, with the Zenfone 9 also work, even if you don't have a dedicated close-up mode or macro mode on the Zenfone 9 with the GCam. You can go to the ultra-wide angle, get very, very close and focus on stuff. Very, very good. On the Xperia 5 Mark IV, utilizing the main cam only, because the ultra-wide angle cannot go so close. You can also get nice little details, but it's not as good as on the Zenfone 9. What do you think about the photos? So I started off with the Zenfone 9 and I will end with the Xperia 5 Mark IV. What do you think about this comparison, especially when it comes to GCam versus Xperia 5 Mark IV's native camera with manual settings, about the photos and videos? Write it down in the comment section. I still think the 5 Mark IV has an edge, even though the HDR and the colors sometimes are a bit more pleasant on the Zenfone 9, and the bokeh on the main camera, because the main camera has a larger sensor. It should be more capable, and you can see it clearly also in the shots as well. But the Xperia 5 Mark IV in general is the more complete package, thanks to its good telephoto camera. And I had no difficulties with overheating or any other problems with the Xperia 5 Mark IV, so I'm very happy to report that the 5 Mark IV seems to be the winner in this category here. And yeah, it is 200 euros more expensive, so it has to be the winner here in this category, offering the telezoom that the Zenfone 9 is missing. Nevertheless, when you compare the GCam and the Xperia, they are very, very good, both very flagship level kind of devices. And yeah, what is your personal opinion? Write it down in the comment section. That's everything for this video. Hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching. Until the next time. Bye.